Thanks for tuning in to this episode with Dr. Jim Barnett. I need to apologize up front. Unfortunately, the audio cut off from the microphones about 12 minutes into the interview. But it's a great interview. I'm not getting rid of it by any means. So unfortunately, if you want to listen to it, you'll just have to listen to the standard phone audio that goes with it. So the audio content, the audio quality is going to go down just a little bit in. Apologies for that. Working to get better at this as we go. So I just wanted to give you a heads up about that, but I still hope you enjoy the conversation. Thanks. Yeah. This is Dr. Jim Barnett. This is he, the one and the only. So thanks for coming to do this with me. I think I'll give a little intro about who you are to me and to our community, and then from there I'll just learn a little bit about you, maybe about your past, your history, and things you're passionate about and whatnot and all that. But
sure.
Dr. Jim Barnett, medical doctor, MD. I don't know your when exactly that happened, but Jim came to our facility when we owned River City CrossFit. Maybe in 2020 or 2021?
I think 21.
Okay, 21. Mm-hmm. From a former student of his, Kayla, who's now a doctor, Dr. Kayla Magafas.
Right.
And, without giving too much of a spoiler alert, he had some goals about touching toes and that sort of thing. And I think everybody in our community pretty quickly fell in love with you because of your attitude, and some of the things you do are very impressive, whether you think so or not. But the way that you hang on rings and climb ropes and the pull-ups and everything. But we all knew that Jim was a cool guy just because of his humility. But when you learn a little bit more about you, you kind of realize that there's some really impressive things that you've done with your life, and so is your family. And you've lived in Peoria for a long time, and you're part of the medical community. And so I think my goal is to get to know a little bit more about that from your angle. So,
well, cool. Thanks for your interest.
Yeah, absolutely. So on that note, is there anything that you want to say at the outset before I, just start asking you questions?
I don't think so. I mean, I appreciate your interest. I was surprised about it. But you're right. I never imagined myself going to a CrossFit gym. In fact, I probably had not comprehended the word CrossFit until about a week before I came there.
Okay.
When I texted Kayla and asked her, what gym did you go to, did you say?
Had you heard of CrossFit? Like heard the term even? Or?
I would imagine, but
yeah.
I hadn't thought about it at all.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't know what it was. So then I just showed up with some fear and trepidation and like, what am I getting into? And I hadn't been exercising as the story goes. Shall I tell you the story?
Yeah, I mean, wherever we want to start. I have my own memories of the first year, but yeah, tell me some stories.
Okay. Well, yeah. Actually, already 20 years ago, I started, almost 20 years, supervising a program that puts rural medical students, or students in rural areas of Illinois. We're trying to build the workforce for Illinois.
So medical students, right?
Medical students, third year. It's called the Rural Student Physician Program.
Okay.
And it's not just theory. It's been shown if you study in an area for a prolonged period of time, you're more likely to go back to that or something similar.
Are you talking about regionally?
Yeah.
Like
regionally, or even get used to being, for instance, a rural doctor. It's so that's kind of the idea is to help enhance the idea of getting back into rural medicine.
And why is that? Why was that something?
Yeah, it's an important thing because there's a lot fewer physicians practicing rural in the United States than urban
Okay.
or suburban. And so the workforce for rural doctors is slowly dwindling. And so there's a number of different ways, that's trying to be worked on. But we have a tiny way with our program of placing students there. So, for instance, less than 10%, 9% of physicians currently practice rural, but the population of the United States is more like 20% rural. So
is it?
That's just a kind of an
So
idea of why we need to do this.
Okay.
And there's been some studies of med students that show in school that fewer than 5% are interested in going rural. And so if that kind of thing continues, it'll get even more and more difficult. So we're trying to work on that.
Yeah.
It's been a lot of fun. The students love going out there. And there was, as you mentioned, 3 or 4 years ago, Kayla was in the program. And
Was it Gibson City?
I went to visit her in
Okay.
Gibson City.
That's right.
And I go out there usually about 6 weeks out, and kind of just making conversation, asked her if she was finding outlets like exercise, that kind of thing. I don't think I knew that she was a big exerciser.
Before she went to Gibson City, or before you met her?
No,
Or before
even
you
when I
sh-
got out there.
Okay. Yeah, because that would have been pretty early on
Yeah.
when she joined our gym, I think.
Yeah. Anyway, she was just really enjoying exercising. That she'd found a gym there, and then she turned the question around to me.
Yeah.
Which was beautiful, in the sense, she said, well, what are you doing for exercise? Fortunately, she felt comfortable enough with me to do that.
So what was it for you was it just part of your typical doctor questionnaire that's like, well, okay, how much do you exercise? Is that why you asked her, or was it?
We had a downtime during the day,
Okay.
Going around. I'm looking at all the things she's doing. I spend about 5 or 6 hours usually with a student a day.
Okay.
I'm really making sure their experience is going well.
Okay.
Sometimes I pull that question out, just, do you have stuff to do in your extra time? Because they're all out there alone, and don't know anyone else in the community frequently, as was the case in her situation. So just finding out what their interests are a bit. Yeah.
And so she turned it back on you. And what did you say to her?
Yeah. So I was like, well, I have to confess, I'm not really exercising, even though I probably talk to people almost daily about that is a good idea. So I would take our dog, my daughter's dog, for walks, things like that once in a while. But
walking is definitely exercise.
Important.
It is.
But I didn't really have a focus on it, and
Yeah.
and so I texted her a few days later and said, "Hey, where was that?" and decided to give it a try.
So just out of curiosity, so I can, poke my own buttons, did she make it so that our gym sounded really good? Is that why you texted her? Or was it more like, okay, I need to exercise, somebody asked me, because I know she was super passionate about River City CrossFit, but I'm just not sure if it was more of a plug to us or more of a you interested for yourself about exercise.
The way she plugged it was, our gym will really kind of, this is how I remember it, kind of accept you the way you are. In other words, maybe it's looked like I was a little older than most people there, or
Gotcha.
maybe I was out of shape, but that's not going to matter. You'll feel comfortable.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
So actually, when I went online, I was looking around, thought, man, I can't really tell, because I saw there was a few CrossFit gyms. So I texted her.
Oh, which one?
Because I wanted to make sure I got to the right one.
yeah, well, the hope is that any CrossFit gym would kind of get rid of those social categories and make make CrossFit accessible for all people, but maybe that's not always the case. And so I'm glad you found your way to us. So
Yeah, I was too.
yeah. So 20 years ago is when this rural program started. And just because I know part of your background and history in terms of your dad's legacy and that sort of thing, was the rural program in any way linked to your past with hospitals in rural locations, or what had you particularly interested in kind of spearheading this rural medicine program?
Yeah. Yeah, you know, I've been working with the program almost 20 years. I just realized the program itself is about 27 years old.
Okay.
Just to put that,
So like
get myself straight on that.
90, late 90s?
Yeah, 97 it started.
Okay.
And I did grow up rural, so that's my main claim.
And where'd you grow up?
Yeah.
I'm just gonna keep asking you
Yeah.
questions as you tell stories.
I grew up in rural Kenya,
Okay.
and so
Like Africa, Kenya.
African.
Okay. Just making sure.
Right, it's not like
Kenya, Illinois, or something. No,
Cuba
Yeah,
or whatever,
right, yes.
Illinois or
So
whatever.
Kenya,
Yeah.
Africa.
Exactly.
Rural Kenya, Africa.
Yeah, it was about 35 miles, I think, west of Nairobi.
Is that the
A
capital?
little bit north.
Kenya,
Yes.
Nairobi?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
How big is Nairobi? Whew. Several million? I guess,
Yes. I actually should know, but I think it's a couple million
Okay.
right now.
It's
I'm
okay
not
if you don't
sure.
either, right? Yeah.
At the time when I grew up, it was 500,000.
Okay, so it's
But the population growth in places like that, which we could talk about, has been so high and so quick. That's where my, background in rural came from. My parents were working in medical work there. So I was in and out of a hospital even while I was growing up, that kind of thing.
And what did your parents do?
My dad was a general surgeon. My mom was a nurse, and she worked alongside of him, especially in surgery. She learned how to do the anesthesia,
Okay.
and then they trained other people to do anesthesia and other things like that.
Okay. And does general surgery just mean general surgery? Like, there's no specialization. It could be your foot, it could be your heart, it could be your brain, or
Yeah, my dad was one of the I'll call one of the old type of general surgeons, in the sense that he truly was able to do most anything besides brain and heart.
Okay. Yeah.
So not really going into the chest too much, and not going into the brain too much, except maybe relieving blood clots and things like that occur. But most other things, from gynecology to orthopedics to urology, and then all the other general things, he did it all pretty much. He was, a rural general surgeon in Africa. There was no one else usually around to do those things.
Okay. And so you say you grew up in rural Kenya. Were you born there?
My parents were working first in Tanzania. They spent
Okay.
10 years there, starting in 1950.
Okay.
And I was born there in 1957.
Okay. So born in Tanzania. Okay.
In a rural community there.
And were they U.S. citizens, your parents?
They were.
Okay.
My dad naturalized. He also grew up in Kenya. His dad was from Australia, mom was from Sweden.
Okay.
So he carried a passport, I think, from the United Kingdom, or I don't know what they called it exactly, because it was a British protectorate.
Okay.
When he grew up in Kenya, and he came to the U.S. for education. He finished high school, did college here, then medical school. Sometime in there,
Mm-hmm.
he had spent the required 5 years, here in the U.S. Or whatever it took, and naturalized.
Okay.
Was in the Army.
Oh, he was in the Army too?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What year? You remember? Did you
Yeah.
know, or?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
He went through med school in the Army from, I guess, 1942 to 45.
Okay.
I think a lot of the med schools were sped up during the World War II to 3-year programs to really get doctors out as quick as possible. There was very little holiday or anything like that. They just were training, getting ready to serve in the Army. Right when he finished, World War II basically ended.
Okay.
And then he did some of that residency type training for a couple of years, and then the Army sent him to Korea between the wars.
Okay.
And he was surgeon in the one of the hospitals in Seoul, Korea.
Okay. So, and just because I'm slightly embarrassed to admit it, but I actually don't know your dad's first name.
Oh, sure. Oh, no. Bill.
Bill.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Dr. Bill.
Mm-hmm. Okay. A lot of people called him Dr. Bill.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so then fast forward a little bit, your parents are a surgeon, nurse in Tanzania, you're born, and any siblings or?
Yeah, I'm the last.
Okay.
Yeah.
Of how many?
Of 6.
Okay.
Yeah, so when my dad went to Korea in 1947 or so, he had a daughter he left behind, and all of a sudden I'm embarrassed because my brother Ted will be listening to this someday. But he also oh boy, I'm getting the years mixed up, but yeah, I think Ted had been born right about then as well. So
okay.
Yeah.
I find if you admit that you're embarrassed, it makes it a little less embarrassing. So sorry, Ted.
Yeah, I think so.
Ted, is it Ted?
Yeah, I was born in 1957, and he's exactly 10 years older than me.
Okay.
So he's 47, and I think, if I'm remembering right, he had just been born before he went out there.
Okay, so 40. I'm trying to do the math here. 47. So that'd be 80 something. Because you're not that old, right? I mean, I know you're not 80.
No, I think he's 77.
Okay, 77.
Okay. Sorry, Ted, we're talking about your age too.
So, sorry. I'm just 47 because 2007 would be 60. So 80. Okay, yeah.
I can't think
gotcha.
of the camera.
Yeah, no,
so.
I can't think of the camera. Yeah. No, okay, I'm with you. 77, I think that's right. 2024, yes. Okay. So that makes you 67. Okay, sorry to show your age to the world. Didn't mean to go down that road. But, all right, so 6 siblings, Tanzania, and then at what point in your life did you guys move to Kenya?
Yeah. So when I was going into first grade,
Okay.
My parents were reassigned to Kenya, and so it shifted a lot of things for me that my siblings had been going through. In other words, homeschooling wasn't a big thing in those days, so they were being sent away to boarding school. It just so happened the hospital that my parents were assigned to had a school there too. My parents were missionaries, so it was called a missionary kids school. So that was the majority of kids that were there were from that background. So they were working the same setting as that school. So that made a big difference for my life in the sense of I never had to really board. Whereas, especially my oldest sister, she probably went away for most of her grade school and high school.
And does that mean away from parents and
Yeah.
everything?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Man, that'd be tough.
Yeah, that was the kind of the fairly usual thing
Okay.
in the setting that I grew up in.
Okay. So I want to rewind a little bit.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that when your dad and mom were reassigned or relocated.
Yeah.
With what organ? Was that part of the U.S. military, or was that part of the missionary organization? Or
Yeah. So my dad got out of the military. I think around 1948.
okay.
Did a couple more years of training.
Mm-hmm.
And then went to Africa with a mission organization called Africa Inland Mission.
Okay.
And then he spent his career, he and my mom, working in Africa with that group.
This is a faith-based organization?
Yeah.
Okay. Like Christian missionary?
Faith-based, Christian, interdenominational
Okay.
mission.
Okay. And were your parents raised? Were they raised religious, or did they?
Yeah, I would say so. My dad was raised in that group.
Oh. Okay.
Yeah, in Kenya.
Ah.
His parents were also with it.
This is fascinating. So your family tree goes in, especially in Africa,
Mhm.
goes back
Yeah.
quite some time. I mean,
It does. 1907, they arrived on a ship in Mombasa, Kenya. My grandparents.
your grandparents
Yeah.
arrived in Mombasa from the U.S.
My grandfather did immigrate to the U.S. He never became a citizen of the U.S., but he immigrated from Australia,
Okay.
and that's where he felt that sense of call to a mission. He had an experience with God, and felt like he was supposed to go, and got some training and learned about this organization, got on a boat, and so happened that there was a woman from Sweden that felt the same type of thing. She got on the boat in Europe. They met each other on the boat, and by the time they got through the Suez Canal down to Mombasa, it was history.
I mean, and we're literally sitting here today because of that, to some extent.
Yes, and so they were married a year later.
Okay. Okay. So deep history in Kenya, and you spent. So when was your first? How long did you live in Kenya? Kenya, yeah.
Personally,
Well, did you live there in more than one phase? And then, if not, when was your first time out of Kenya?
yeah. Well, the way. Well, the short answer for let's say my parents, they
Mhm.
spent about, in terms of assignments, 10 to 12 years in Tanzania,
Okay.
depending on how you look at the assignments, because
Mhm.
some of that time is spent back in the U.S. reconnecting with supporters and maybe get some training, things like that. That's how my dad used it. He took extra training when he'd come back sometimes.
Okay.
And then he spent about 18 years in Kenya,
Okay.
and then about another 10 or 11 years in a country called the Comoro Islands, which is, it's just, if you go to the border of Tanzania and Mozambique and then go straight out into the Indian Ocean,
Okay.
about a couple hundred miles or something, come to this group of 4 islands
Mhm.
called the Comoros. One of them is a French island, and the other 3 are independent.
Okay.
In fact, totally off subject, but I noticed Mayotte, the French island, just a couple days ago had the worst cyclone come through there that they've had in 90 years.
Oh, really?
They're really struggling. So
Like rain and.
rain and wind. They have apparently a number of casualties and things like that.
Okay.
So my heart's out to them, even, just talking to them.
Sure.
I'm talking about that area right now.
Yeah.
But they spent their last 10, 11 years of their career on this very isolated area. Not a lot of people know about the Comoros.
No.
And serving there, but we can get back to that sometime. But so that's them. But so during that 18 years in Kenya, I was there from first grade to 12th grade.
Okay.
2 of those grades were in the U.S. because of those breaks taken. That was during my 6th grade year and my 11th grade.
Okay. So you had some small bouts in the U.S.
Yeah.
But you finished your high school, because I don't know what they call it,
Yeah,
secondary school, or
we were actually in an American curriculum.
Okay.
In Kenya.
Okay.
And so it was accredited, I think, by an American body.
Okay. So for all intents and purposes, the same general timeline in terms of grades and age, at which point you would finish high school.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So you were 18-ish, and then did you stay in Kenya? Did you move to the U.S.?
Yeah, I came back. I went, and that's how I ended up in Illinois. I went to college outside of Chicago.
Which college?
Wheaton College.
Oh yeah. I think I knew a couple of people that went there.
Yeah.
Okay. That's also a small Christian college.
It's a small Christian college.
Did you do like pre-medical school, or?
I did. I didn't know for sure, but
Yeah.
I took all the pre-med classes and majored in chemistry and
So how did you pick? Because there's obviously a ton of small colleges, and if you wanted a small Christian college, there's a ton of small Christian colleges. So how did you land in Illinois and outside of Chicago?
It became I won't call it a family tradition, but a number of family had gone there, starting with my dad.
Okay, to Wheaton.
To Wheaton. He had heard about it. He went to high school, or finished high school in South Carolina, and went to a Bible school there. And then heard about Wheaton and ended up there himself. And so then I had other of my siblings, relatives, others went there as well. But a big drawing factor is my oldest sister, 12 years older than me, was living there. And, she went to the U.S. when I started first grade, and we'd hardly connected. And I don't know how much I really premeditated this, but I really did find it such a joy to get to know her some while I went to college.
Yeah.
So it's kind of that connection.
Are you still close?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. In fact, I would say all of our siblings are pretty close.
That's really nice. Mm-hmm. How many of them are in Illinois?
One.
Okay.
Yeah. That's the sister I was just talking about has moved to California.
Okay.
But the sister closest to me in age, Martha, lives in Normal.
Okay, that's nice.
Yeah.
And then the other 3?
The farthest away is Carol. She's in England.
Okay.
And then Eileen in Kansas.
Okay.
And Ted is in Georgia.
Okay. So Barnett family is
all over
the place.
Yeah.
Okay. And Bev, where's Bev from?
Yeah, she.
And also, when did you meet?
Yeah.
Let's get into that.
That's part of the laughter. Yeah. Her parents are from North Carolina.
Okay. That's right. I think I knew that because I know you go there every maybe once a year or so. A couple times.
Right now, a lot.
A lot.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Especially since even before my dad died, because he was living with us, but since that time she's been down there a lot. She's there now, but her parents worked for a different organization, but she grew up in Kenya as well.
Outside of knowing you and your family?
We grew up about 15 miles apart.
When did you meet?
In 10th grade.
In Kenya?
Yeah, that's when she started the school that I was at.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what's I mean, without getting too deep into her background, were her parents involved in the same organization, or?
Yeah, they were in a different organization, but a Christian denominational mission,
Okay.
the Southern Baptist Mission, actually.
Okay. And what was the purpose of, I mean, obviously providing medical health or medical treatment and health services to presumably people that have lack of infrastructure to have those services. But what was is that what the mission of the organization was, or is there, to do it faith-based? I mean, was there preaching involved? Was there, I guess?
Yeah, no, yeah, definitely there was, a deep focus on sharing Christ, whether it was through preaching or just word of mouth, talking.
And was Christianity, is that a predominant religion in Kenya, or is it was that sort of out of the realm of comfort zone? Was it expected? I'm just kind of curious.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It is now. I think in the 80% or more, if I'm remembering right. Whoever's Googling that.
Yeah.
But let's say when my grandparents were there, in 1907 or something like that, I'm sure the statistics were much different.
Okay.
And so, yeah, the groups, I would say both my wife's parents group and my parents were very focused on both sharing the message as well as kind of the opportunity to serve people physically. And then within those groups, they tend to debate how much emphasis should be on, establishing churches, for instance, versus doing social works and all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Whereas, I mean, that's, I wore a shirt today called Africa Exchange.
Okay.
And this is a group that my brother-in-law started.
Okay. Nonprofit.
And I think as things develop, I really respect how he has gone forward with kind of the mission that we both have kind of grown up in this type of setting.
Okay.
And the words exchange mean a lot. He goes into different communities and really listens to what art is needed and seeks to bring, kind of an exchange of ideas and enhance, I guess, what the community wants. It's often with children, developing children's resources, especially in rural areas. Getting back to the rural. So Nairobi's grown so much, but some of it is in the areas in poverty, and so he's working in building up rural communities. He and Mel, his wife, to make it more attractive to stay in the rural settings, and more potentially profitable, or where you can make a living and all this kind of things. So I don't know, kind of talking a little bit of a different organization, but I see kind of the growth in all of this, and that it's very much a matter of exchange of ideas and that type of thing.
Yeah, no, there's definitely parallels between, I'm kind of connecting some dots here of I never even thought about the idea behind you being the leading force with the rural program, the rural med school program, and how that all links together with your background and history in Africa, and I'm curious how much of it was intentional versus how much of it was part of your fabric. You know what I mean?
It was very generic. In fact, I didn't imagine it. I did imagine someday working some with medical students,
Okay.
and had over the years, just had them in the office. I've my main career here has been what would be more focused like community health clinics, and that's been my passion actually.
So
Urban community health
okay.
clinics.
So is that a symbolic of an underserved community
Yeah.
when you say community health?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it is. So yeah, the department chair had seen some of the things I was doing and knew some of my interests, and called me one day and just asked me, hey, this has been opened up. Would you be interested in directing this rural program? So at the time, I wasn't working full time in community health, and so I ended up doing this rural job a day a week, and it's really good kind of to have that variety. In medical care. It can be kind of you hear about physician burnout. There's a high rate of that. I think for me it was very helpful to cut back a little bit clinical and have this other aspect of going out into the rural settings and enjoying getting to know the people out there and the med students.
Yeah, definitely.
Work on this. So that's I don't know. We've kind of gone around, but you asked me how I got into it. It was just the chairman of the department chair just called me and asked me, would you be interested? And I looked at it and was like, yeah.
Okay.
It just so happened that my first child was starting college, and so adding something seemed kind of helpful at that moment.
Yeah, sure. That makes a lot of sense. I
Practical too.
Yeah. So, okay, so I'm gonna circle back around to this because I have questions from where we just left off, but I want to make sure I'm plugging all the holes here for me. You went to pre-med school, and then you went to med school still in Illinois or in the Chicago area, or?
Yeah, I applied to U of I, to Rush, and to the school my dad went to in New York, Albany Med School.
Okay, and which one did you?
And I chose U of I. It was way cheapest.
Yeah.
I mean, by far.
So U of I med school in Champaign-Urbana, or was it here?
At that time you could start either in Chicago or Champaign-Urbana.
Okay.
And then get into the second year in Peoria or Rockford.
Okay. So I'm trying. What I'm getting at is, how did the city of Peoria become so graced with your presence?
No, it's really was a critical moment. Actually, I was in the middle of my first year of medical school, and my sister Martha, who I mentioned to you, was in Normal at that time, living in Carlock.
I used to live in Carlock.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Curious where she lived.
Oh, right there on the main street.
Okay. I think we lived on Franklin, which was one street off of the main street.
Wow. She's a nurse.
Okay.
Very dedicated nurse, and she was working at Broman or whatever the name was then in I guess 1980.
Okay.
Christmas time, I think. I don't know, winter time, and probably coming home after the 11 o'clock, second shift or something, and someone went right through a stop sign, and she was in a car accident. The two people in the car that hit her died.
Oh gosh.
Yeah.
She was.
And
okay.
She was okay. She was really banged up.
Okay.
And ended up in the hospital here in Peoria.
St. Francis?
Yeah.
Okay.
God's preserved her life. She crawled out of a ditch and hailed a car to come help her or something, as I recall. And But I came down to visit her, Bev and I did, and just saw us sitting there visiting her. Two of the med students, I think, that had gone to my alma mater came in to visit her, because she'd also gone there for a while, and two med students, and they turned around to me and started talking about, now you're in Chicago campus. Oh, you should come down here. You should come down here, and I gave it some thought, just kind of like Kayla, I guess. He invited me to do something, and thought, well, it'd be great to be near Martha now. I'd been with my sister up there, and it seemed like a good opportunity to be down here. So that's what I gave it. I applied to transfer down here, and they said sure.
Okay, and that was, you said 1980-ish? 81?
Yeah, I came down here, I think, in 81.
Okay.
Summer of 81.
Okay. And so when you finished med school, did you become a physician in Peoria, and that's where your career has kind of spurred from?
Yeah, almost most of the time. So it's been 40 years since I finished, and I did a year of internship at St. Francis, and I had, my number one passion at that moment was to spend a little time working with my dad. And so I took a break from training after that first year, because I thought he was going to retire.
Mm-hmm.
And in 1985, went to the Comore Islands,
Mm-hmm.
the place I mentioned,
Mm-hmm.
and spent a year there approximately with Bev.
Okay.
Just, it was a small, fairly rural hospital there on that island,
Mm-hmm.
and assisted him in whatever way I could.
So was your dad, was he like a hero to you, or was he, what was your take on I obviously know that he lived with you and, toward the end of his life or several years.
Yeah.
What's your perspective on your dad?
Yeah, I would really call him a hero to me. I really looked up to him. And I think many people do. I just realize he's not perfect, but he was super capable physician to learn from, but it was something much greater than that.
Like what?
Yeah. Somehow he was able to let us know of his love and presence in the midst of being a super busy doctor. And there's a gift to that, of just he was present in our lives, whether it was at sports. He became the team doctor. He was actually the school doctor, because the school was right there. It was interesting how when he died, a number of his former students from when I was at school, or even before when I was young in school, but they were probably 10 years ahead of me, wrote in, just explaining what an impact he'd made. He was very present with people, and took the time with them. There's a story that's been on my mind this week. I don't know how it relates to this, but he liked to tell this story. When he was a young kid, 5, 6 years old, he heard his parents argue, and he went to bed feeling terrible. Here's my parents arguing about something. But he couldn't sleep. But then he saw their shadow in the hall,
Mm-hmm.
and he suddenly realized they were hugging. And then he could hear them saying, you know, I'm sorry, will you forgive me, that kind of thing. And he, you know, I mean, he was just sailing in his mind, and he could sleep finally. Well, I think that symbolizes to me who he became. He became someone who really respected other people, and he knew how to say sorry. He and that tenderness that he took into becoming a physician was what motivated him. He cared about people, and so yes, I wanted to be with him and my mom. They were very loving with each other and caring. So Bev and I lived with them in the same house in the Comoros for almost a year, just working in the work they did, assisting in surgery, caring for the inpatients.
Would you say that, I guess, when you think about all the years of your life, is that one that sticks out to you?
Definitely, yeah. It was actually very tough. There were some super tough things that happened that year. But I loved it. It was really hard for Bev. In particular, the weather was hard. It's very hot on those islands. Mm-hmm. She was pregnant.
Oh gosh.
Making it double hard, probably.
Wow.
We had our first child shortly after that in Kenya. And, but, you know, I came back and spent the next 2 years at Methodist, finishing family medicine. And then I went and spent 4 months in Zambia with some friends there.
Okay.
Bev and I did, now with 2 children. And that was a really impactful 4 months. AIDS was at its kind of at somewhat of a peak in Africa at that moment. Just working in rural Zambia. And so during those 2 trips I just described, which I was primarily in other countries, I did spend time in Kenya before and after, and probably worked a little bit, you know, with some folks there. But you asked if I'd worked in Kenya. I haven't really worked there.
Sure.
Just visited intermittently.
Okay.
But I always felt, you know, thinking like, well, I'll probably be coming back to Africa. But my vision changed. Yeah. And so here I am.
Yeah, no, I mean, I just got to say, those sound like some formative years of your life. I can't imagine having a father that was living, well, one, to your point, being present in the moment, but also having that compassion and those standards, and also being a general surgeon and physician in a different country, and then you taking your life, having gone through medical school, gotten married, baby on the way, I'm gonna go work alongside my dad. Like that's a beautiful dream. I mean, that's something I think that that's why I'm doing this. Like this podcast thing is to pull out those parts of your life, because otherwise I would never know that piece of you. And I want to say one more thing.
Yeah.
As a tribute to your dad, but through you, I think that most people would agree with me in saying that the things that you speak so highly of your dad about are the things that you embody as a person. You're very present. You're very humble. You're compassionate. You see people on their level, and never once has anybody ever gotten any sort of judgment or condemnation feelings, or like you're a doctor and I'm not, or you know more than me. And that's an increasingly tough thing, I think, in this world. I think a lot of physicians today, and I'm not speaking poorly of anybody at all, I'm just saying a general experience from me is that you have a degree, you have the information, and this other person doesn't, and so they're the expert, and so you should listen to them. don't get any of that from you. And I think that's a really important trait and characteristic when you're relating to people and when people ultimately come to respect you and listen to you. So I just wanted to give your dad a shout out through you, that I think that that's part of a legacy that you carry on with your life.
Well, I appreciate that. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely.
He really did. You nailed it. You know, do I see him as a hero? Yeah, I do. Yeah.
Good.
And yeah, we miss him. It was such a privilege to have him in our home for almost 10 years, about 9.5.
Well, it's a privilege for me to, even though he was, you know, toward the end of his life, I got to share a meal with you guys.
Yeah.
And I, you know, I'm probably forever grateful for that, you know. So thank you on that.
You know, I was really struck, just to share a little bit more how my life changed its attention.
Still going, okay.
I remember a few different things that were swirling around. When I was waiting in Kenya for my daughter to be born, our first daughter, I read the book Roots.
Oh, Roots.
Yeah, by
Alex
Alex
Haley, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And it really impacted me in terms of, man, what, in a sense, a people group went through coming to the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
in slavery from Africa, you know, and and then shortly after that, I went to a conference. I don't even know how I was invited to it in Chicago when we got back with a group called the Christian Community Health Fellowship. But it was a brainchild somewhat of a person named John Perkins, who became a hero to me.
Okay.
I met him then. I probably had read a book already by him called Let Justice Roll Down, and he's written a lot of other things since. A more recent one is called One Blood, where he kind of gives that impression of, hey, look, we're all one human race.
Mm-hmm.
And this idea that we can think less of people based on color or anything else is just in a sense, a ridiculous human development.
Yeah.
And all these things were really hitting me, but in this conference at a medical place called Lawndale Christian Health Center in Chicago, in Lawndale, I started to feel a sense of pull towards just living out my life in the U.S., making friendships here, and so in a sense, that's what I did, or that's what Bev and I did. We both, felt that way.
So what was it about? Because there's a couple more topics that I want to get to, and I think this is a perfect transition. What was it about community health? And I mean, there's a lot of money to be made in medicine, and a lot of doctors do, and rightfully so. And I'm just curious, why community health? What is that, where your heart is? Do you feel like you could help underserved people, and do you feel like you have helped underserved people?
Yeah, I guess I wanted to serve in a, at least cross-culturally, that kind of thing,
Mm-hmm.
and I think underserved, under-resourced kind of situations. I almost want to say that the people that I serve, I wish they would answer the question whether they feel that they've been helped, because sometimes that's like, I don't know for sure. I hope so.
It's tough.
I truly hope so.
Because there's a lot of variables in our world and society that go into whether a person is healthy or not.
Mm-hmm.
It's not as much as as much as resources do help, you can also still be a healthy person without resources. It's maybe not as easy, but no, I think to your point, yeah, it would be nice to know how helpful, for you are here as a person willing and able to help an underserved and under-resourced population, and then the back side of that is whether or not that actually happens. I imagine that's a tough thing to kind of...
Yeah, because, I don't know how the people, I trust these diagrams, the people who constructed them, but the clinical work that I do supposedly impacts about 20% of a person's health.
Mm-hmm.
But then the social determinants of health, the drivers like that, or maybe even the political decisions of what the environment's like.
Absolutely.
They affect maybe the political area 20%, but the social determinants of health are more in the 40%, I think. Where and so I think what we do makes an impact, and I'll give you an example of the first number of years at Heartland. I think we were running 20 to 30% range of uninsured, and that's what we kind of exist, to do is to care for uninsured and those who are having trouble getting care, and then helping them through navigate the system. Now, after Obamacare arrived, that dipped down into we're to less than 5% now of uninsured.
Okay.
But that's just one impact. Are we helping? I hope so, with that aspect. But man, the social determinants of health, are more do I have transport? Do I have a job? Do I have enough money to live? Do I have food?
Mm-hmm.
And we do have folks that are trying to work on those aspects, but the desire is to have a kind of a holistic way of thinking about healthcare.
Yeah, more than just the doctor's visits, but the lifestyle changes and the social structure, the social habits that you're a part of, and so is Heartland a nonprofit, or I don't know?
Yeah, Heartland's a nonprofit. It's called a Federally Qualified Health Center.
Okay.
To my knowledge, it's the main federally qualified health center, if not the only one here in Peoria.
Okay. And what does that mean? That just means you get federal grant money, or?
Yeah, it's more than grant money. Sometimes there's grant money, I think. Sometimes I don't know how it all works, but this was a development, I think, in late 80s or something like that. Now they're all over the country. What I mean is kind of a political development where there's enhanced reimbursement for Medicare and Medicaid if you meet certain criteria. And so those criteria would include, of course, the location and who the population you're serving. And then the population has to make up about at least 50% of your board, so that there's control of the organization by the patients that you're serving.
So how are board members selected? Just by community? Do they have to live or be a part of the?
Over 50%. So not every board member is a part of the group, but
citizens, or or do they have to be former clients of Heartland, or both, or?
Yeah, that 50% has to be current patients.
Okay, gotcha.
And they have to represent the whole demographic. So, if we're serving 20% Latino patients, we should have at least 20% on the board, or 50% African American, et cetera, et cetera. That's my understanding. It's supposed to be a fairly good representation.
Yeah, sounds like it. So, maybe you don't know this, and maybe I'm getting way too deep into the weeds of this, just
No.
out of curiosity again, and how Peoria works, people like you who serve Peoria in, you know, on a personal capacity and in a big capacity. So you mentioned 30% on average uninsured, and that percentage is down to 5% or so ballpark. So does Heartland write off the who pays the bills for the uninsured? And yeah, no, I think that's my question.
Yeah, so there's a sliding fee scale. So there was that set state sense that there should be, I guess, some responsibility of the person that's getting care. So, so it's based on income. So
Right.
Just so that, you know, so the uninsured, when I first started, we're paying maybe like the lowest number was $20. I think now it might be 30 or 40. I'm not sure.
Okay.
So it's not, for someone who's uninsured, that may not seem very cheap, but it's a lot different than the usual doctor visit charge these
Absolutely.
days.
Yeah.
But what's meant is, when I said we get enhanced reimbursement for Medicaid and Medicare, so we're getting a lot more for those visits compared to someone in private practice.
Okay.
At least I don't know actually the details of how much more.
Yeah.
But
it's interesting though.
So we're supposed to take that money and apply it to care for the uninsured. I think we're also given that latitude to provide counseling services. Like we have counseling LCSWs, and then we have other services that reach out into the community to help them understand how to get health insurance or what health insurance might be available to them, and to counsel them about all sorts of things, including housing and other areas that they might need.
Okay.
So we utilize those monies in all those different areas, those enhanced reimbursements and things.
Okay, that makes sense. So I guess just kind of a couple more things. I feel like I could honestly talk for hours and kind of keep poking into your life, but I don't want to use all of your day. But so I'm trying to decide which route I want to go. I'll go with CrossFit first. So as far as CrossFit goes, obviously I've been passionate about CrossFit for a number of years, and my take on it was that, you know, kind of like you, I wanted to provide this, what I thought was such a great service to underserved population. I thought that it was such a great service, particularly because it was a lifestyle change. And for people that formerly maybe didn't believe in themselves, there was this new platform, a new community of people that taught you the methodology, that taught you the nutrition and lifestyle habits, but probably most important, believed in you. And when you had a sense of task accomplishment, that's what in my mind triggered people coming back to this place and this space. This is probably a bit high visionary for me, the way that I am. You know, I thought that this could be a big impact in the way in helping solve some of these bigger socioeconomic problems. I think there's probably a lot of work that goes into that. But my question is this something? Is there a problem with the healthcare system? And if you don't feel comfortable answering any of these questions, you don't have to. I'm just curious, from your take, is there a problem with the system, and is there are there solutions out there? Is places CrossFit or places like CrossFit a part of it? Is community fitness a part of it? I'm just kind of curious, you know, now that you've done CrossFit for 3 years or so, you've seen some changes, you've experienced some of the good vibes and all that. I just kind of want your perspective here.
Yeah, I think, well, you asked, is there a problem with the healthcare system? Yeah, we've got a lot of problems, I think. But if nothing else, we do need to get to emphasizing the benefits of exercise and diet. And it's just really hard to make behavior change, I think. So that would be a real emphasis, and that drew me actually to River City CrossFit. In a sense, your vision of trying to reach to those who wouldn't normally do something like this. It's just really difficult because
it is.
Someone who might benefit is just not maybe the priority in life to figure out how to do that. It takes a lot of shifting, of change of momentum, and a bit of cheerleading, you know.
Definitely.
Not only from you, but, you know, back at home, you know, like, hey, this is really important. You keep going.
No, I think that coaching is way, way, way beyond cheerleading. I think cheerleading is a very small part of it.
Yeah.
But it is a really important part of it for a segment of the population, in particular, that maybe doesn't have the motivational or discipline tools inherent in them, or they didn't grow up with a natural tendency to, you know, work on things for themselves. I think that cheerleading aspect of it really, like, for me, when somebody tells me I can do something, I believe it. You know what I mean? Like, and if somebody tells me I can't do something, I tend to tell them that they can, you know, go F off or whatever. But when somebody, I mean, there is a energy. I don't know if it's tangible or not, but there's definitely an energy that impacts me. If I have a body of people that are telling me that I can do something, I'm much more likely to believe that.
Yeah, there's an example that happened. I literally did not believe I could touch my toes again.
Yeah.
The joke at my house was, you know, every year at Christmas, my wife would say, I want for Christmas for you to touch your toes. And I'd get kind of like motivated. I mean, it was a joke, but to try and exercise it, I really, you know, I was a foot away from doing that. I told you that I wanted to touch my toes.
Yeah, that was one of the first things you told me.
Because you asked me what my goal was.
That's right.
And it wasn't a joke.
Yeah, I know.
Even though we would joke about it.
Yeah, but I mean, I knew it wasn't a joke. I knew that was a very real thing.
At home it was kind of a joke, but and you said probably in 4 months, and literally it happened in 4 months, and I really didn't think that could happen.
Oh, I didn't know the timeline was so long. You know what the crazy part is? If I would have said 3 months, it would have happened in 3 months. I bet it would have.
Anyway,
yeah.
but
well, you touch your toes.
But the same thing is happening. You know, like at our office, we would love to see more, you know, opportunities for exercise. We've talked about putting a gym in because we own the old Kroger building.
Right. Yep.
I don't know if that's going to happen yet or not. It's been going on talk for a long time, but we'd love to see those kind of changes and dietary changes. So I don't know how to make those changes, but just keep pushing, I guess.
Yeah, that's a tough. I mean, that is a firsthand. I experienced how hard that was. I really, you know, like I said, I mentioned it several times on here. I've got a vision for things, and I think that I can go take on the world, and I'm wrong most of the time. My vision was that I could really have an impact in curtailing some of these behavior traits, particularly in the south end of Peoria or in underserved populations. And because I believe that I'm really good at like cheerleading and getting people to believe in themselves.
Yeah.
But I just I didn't have the impact.
And how to make the connection and who has, just all the other resources that go into getting there to begin with and having the time for it.
That's right.
And the priority. But, you know, what comes to my mind is I mentioned this guy who really impacted my life. His name is John Perkins. He's an African American guy that I just want to talk to you, tell you about him. He's still alive. I think he's in his 90s now. He lives in Mississippi.
Okay.
But I was just thinking about him, how he grew up in Mississippi. His brother came home from World War II. World War II vet. His brother was standing with his girlfriend, gonna go to a movie, and had to go a side door rather than the front door. Anyway, a whole bunch of people were at the side door.
Was his girlfriend white?
No.
Okay.
No, I don't think so. I don't know. I mean, that wasn't part of the story.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah. But for some reason, a white policeman was attracted to maybe people talking too loud or whatever. Anyway, there was a bit of an argument. This vet was shot and died.
I'm sorry, this was John Perkins'
brother.
Okay.
Yeah. And it just so impacted John's life, with that, with the reality of the racism that was going on. And he left Mississippi, along with so many people. He joined the kind of the Great Migration north and west, but he went to California.
Mm-hmm.
But there, he felt like he met God in a way that transformed his life, and Jesus. And this is the amazing thing to me. Eventually, he and his wife felt like, we need to go back to Mississippi. They never imagined going back to Mississippi. They were so, they left so angry. But they went and lived out there most of their lives, as far as I know. Just loving people there, building community. And then he became a mentor to so many people, like this group in Chicago and all around the country. Finding ways to develop community that really mattered, and that's how I got kind of like just really I sense like, man, it gives me some sense of reality that God really is working in the midst of a lot of pain, and I can see it through people like that, to make a change, to go back to Mississippi, and has seen, I'm sure, so much change in so many people's lives there. But anyway, he started another organization called Christian Community Development Association, and the way I remember it, and I haven't kept up probably, but they started with 3 principles, and they impacted me. And one was relocation, and that was like work, locate among the people you work with.
Mm-hmm.
And so whether the issues related to that and everything, that really motivated me. I wanted to live near where I worked, and so finally it came together when I worked at Heartland. I worked a little bit at Carver as well, but reconciliation, and that principle was reconciling our relationships. He was full of forgiveness and reconciling, and that's honestly that's what we need. And then his other R was redistribution, and I don't know how to do that, but that's kind of physical redistribution. And I think we do that by learning to be friends.
Mm-hmm.
And learning how to engage with people that are different from ourselves.
Absolutely.
And we don't, and just refusing to, I think we're called in different ways. Like, we're called out of the city, we're called into the city, but not leaving the city necessarily just because of fear or things like that, but more out of like, hey, this is what I think I'm supposed to do,
No.
And yeah, so I live in the city, and I'm here, and just hanging out, trying to make friends, and that's what I'm doing.
That's beautifully said. I love the idea of relocation, and in a world where the internet takes you wherever you want to be, and global companies, so much of the product that we experience, that we physically experience, I mean, this was probably made 4,000 miles from where I live. So I'm just saying that this idea of you living in the community close to the people that you work with, I think there's something to that. I definitely is. And then I'll also say, you say you don't know how to redistribute it, but I think you're probably doing it more than you know. And maybe I don't understand his principle, but I think that from the sense that I gather from you, you're taking your life experiences and the things that are valuable to you, and you're sharing them. And I think that's redistribution, definitely, in some sense. So.
Yeah. So, I'm really grateful for people like that.
I'll have to look him up. I'm happy you shared. You said he's still alive?
Yeah, he is.
In Mississippi?
In Mississippi, no. Well, I think they live in Jackson now.
Okay.
Used to, for years, in a place called Mendenhall.
Okay. Yeah, I'll definitely look him up. Mm-hmm. Well, let me ask you one more question. Okay. I don't want it to be too deep. I think I look at you. I've known you for I don't know, 3.5 years or so, and it is hard for me to imagine you having any sort of hardships or family hardships or mental hardships, because you just present so kind and so humble and so willing to treat everybody so kindly all the time. So I guess it's a two-part question. Do you experience mental hardships or tough days, or things that you have to talk yourself through? And my hunch is that you do. And if you do, maybe you don't. Maybe you are living on some otherworldly plane, and share that with us. But if you do, kind of, what are your tools or practices that help you kind of get you through those tougher days?
Oh, wow. Yeah. I mean, can I describe to you what things were like when I came to you?
Yeah, please.
I'm talking about coming to you as if you were my coach, so to speak.
Yeah,
but
sure.
It wasn't just a sense like, man, I really just need to exercise because I know medically it's important. I was pretty down, actually. And I'll just put it out there. Shortly before that, I was being threatened with a lawsuit. COVID was going on, and we'd been through the worst of COVID, but it's so funny when it's not funny, but when some of that was going on, the threat, I was living in our basement because we, at the beginning of the COVID isolation, we didn't know, how is this going to turn out, and should I be breathing upstairs with everybody? I would eat up there, but separate from the family.
Sure, yeah.
And that was kind of stressful. When a doctor or anyone, I'm sure, goes through these kind of threats, you feel, pretty vulnerable. And I knew that exercise could be a big help towards maintaining an even keel, so to speak. So no, I was, so some of the things, prayer is important to me, and prayer can be just crying out like, man, I would actually, this is almost embarrassing, since you asked my tools.
Yeah, please.
I'm sitting there on the bed alone for about 2 months each night, while we were trying to figure out, do I live separate for a while COVID's going on? And this other thing also was hitting me at the same time. And I would just be crying out. I'd had my Bible there in the bed next to me. And I'd read once in a while about, some things that were encouraging, tried to do some memorizing and things like that of Psalm 46 became important to me in that phase,
And
which is, how could I forget? Basically, calling out to God as your refuge. There's a famous word in there: "Be still and know that I'm God." But
okay.
Those kinds of things start to help me get my mind in order. Prayer and scripture, and but having someone to talk to. I mean, when you're under stress, I have a confidant in Bev, and I couldn't do any of the things we talked about. I know that sounds weird. I mean, I'm sure I could, but really, Bev has provided that stability I needed in so many different ways. And so where do I turn? I mean, I told you she's in North Carolina, but I'm texting her and like, hey, would you pray for me? I'm going over to this interview. I don't know what I'm going to say. Those kinds of things.
That's
So so when we talk about, I'm so privileged in the sense that I have this person who knows all about my background, grew up as a third culture kid, and that's what we call ourselves. And I'd like to explain that if we had time another time maybe, but it's kids that grew up in two different cultures. They end up not really knowing what culture they are.
Sure. Yeah.
It's a third culture.
Okay.
So I could be talking to someone that maybe grew up in India or anywhere, but grew up between India and the United States or something like that. We understand our culture, culture, very quickly. We'll understand each other. So I have this third culture kid as my wife, and so where do I go with stress? I mean, it's so helpful to have confidants, isn't it, to be able to share with. And so
relationships, I think.
Relationships for sure, and that's so much. I've been thinking about this so much. What I think Christmas is about is that God came to earth to establish good relationships with His children, and bring reconciliation between each other, and all the mess that we have here on earth, and if we can bring some type of reconciliation, that's what it's about, really, and between each other.
I think so. I mean, I don't. None of this exists without a social connection between people. So
if you saw me as like internally, and then in fact, in that particular year was really tough.
I'm happy that you shared that. Not that it means anything different. It just it helps me build my relationship with you, I think. And I know you on a deeper level now, and so I'm happy that you shared that.
Yeah, well, for doctors, one of the hardest things they can go through in their career is something like these kinds of threats, or people trying to, not that we're perfect, but we're trying to do the best we can.
Absolutely.
Generally, I think.
Well, and it's not an easy road to get there. I mean, you guys have put yourselves through probably hell and back to be able to go through med school. To student debt is a way different thing now than it was 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago. But to do all that, and then to put your heart on your sleeve and work in the healthcare industry to help with a community that you're trying to be a part of, and then to have all that come back, I can't even imagine. It's just, I mean, that's just so, yeah. No, I see your point there.
Yeah. So, you're right. When sometimes there's that, probably doctors learn how to create that sense of everything's okay, everything's going to be okay, but it's not always feeling the way.
Sure. Yeah.
So that's the answer to your question. Did I answer your question?
You absolutely did, and I'm so glad that you shared it. And just so you know, it doesn't change my perspective on you at all. I still see you as this really brilliant addition to not only my life but to Peoria. And I hope that other people can kind of get this sense and share in some of, I don't know, maybe these 3 principles with you, your relocation, your reconciliation, and your redistribution that John Perkins has, I think that you seem to be living those out in a very humble way. And I just hope that somehow, in some way, sharing your experiences with whoever's watching can add some more value back to your life in those tough situations. So,
Well, thanks for letting me do that.
Yeah,
And,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Anything else that you want to, we can do another. I'm happy to have repeat guests. So literally I could talk probably for, many, many hours about some of these other topics.
Yeah.
But is there anything that you want to?
Well, yeah, I think just wishing the holidays to be really special for people, to reconcile in their family life, and that forgiveness will be just a big part of our lives, and remembering the people who are really hurting right now. I think, holidays aren't easy for so many people, but we've talked about how hard it is sometimes just to get to a doctor visit or to an exercise place. Our hearts, our communities need to be with our brothers and sisters who are probably struggling more than ourselves sometimes.
Yeah. And so what I take of that, just to put a nice little bow on it, is, make an effort to try to meet people where they are, and maybe even to go out of your way sometimes to find somebody and ask them how they're doing, and not, and like on a deep and genuine level, like, how are you doing? That kind of, because there's a lot of people in our lives that probably are going through some stuff that they would really like to have that question asked of them.
Yeah. Yeah, and to really, so often we don't really feel like we have the time to really listen.
Mm-hmm.
I know I'm that way, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, and you have to have that relationship and time.
Yeah.
Like right now,
Mm-hmm.
after 3 years of knowing you, I trusted you to interview me.
Yeah.
And I trusted whoever's watching even to reveal a hard time.
Yeah.
But it's hard to develop those relationships, to really be transparent, isn't it?
It is. And thank you for doing this interview, because I'll say, as I'm kind of developing this, whatever I'm doing, I don't really know what I'm doing, but as I'm trying to get voices out there, it's harder than I anticipated to have people willing to come do an interview. And so I appreciate your trust that, I
Sure.
was going to facilitate this in a way that makes you hopefully feel comfortable. And I guess my real goal was to help share more of Jim with the world. And so to anybody watching, I hope that goal has been accomplished. So.
Well, thank you.
All right. Anything else?
I don't think so right now.
All right. Thanks, Jim. Appreciate it.